Welcome to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment. The HiT cast offers a weekly look at Hollywood from a conservative point of view. Sick of media bias infecting Hollywood headlines? Tired of stars insulting your views? HiT has your back. Now, here's your host, Christian Toto.
Welcome to episode 29 of the Hollywood in Toto podcast. Thanks for listening. This week we're talking with Dave Berg, who for 18 years served as a producer on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. He's got some pretty interesting thoughts about late-night TV, Stephen Colbert, and the current late-night landscape. It's radically different than it was when Jay Leno was the biggest guy on late night just a few years ago. But before our interview, I wanted to talk a little bit about the shooting attack on several GOP politicians earlier this week and how it ties to both the media and Hollywood. You know, for years, some people on the right argued that Hollywood had blood on its hands for
Nobody puts baby in a corner.
You will believe a man can fly.
That's right. I'm getting too old for this.
Get to the chopper if you feel lucky, punks.
Buzz, your girlfriend. Woof.
Yo, Adrian.
Hey, we're covering all these franchises and more over here on iTunes at the Franchise Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Ehrenberg.
And I'm your host, Henry Papali, and check us out, folks.
What's your favorite scary movie? Probably being covered. All right. Take the red pill.
glorifying gun violence in all those action movies. I disagreed. You know, we choose to see action-soaked films, and Hollywood can't be held responsible if we take up arms after seeing Expendables Part 8. Even if they could prove a link, it's the price we pay for living in a free society. Would we want to stop movie studios from making those movies? It's a complicated issue, and it's an emotional one too, but artistic expression does matter. Then the media suggested that right-wing radio, and more specifically Sarah Palin, were partially responsible when Representative Gabby Giffords got shot by Jared Loughner. Once again, I disagreed, especially since the shooter was clearly deranged. He wasn't inspired by any sort of specific, coherent ideology. It just didn't wash. And that Sarah Palin map with the sites in it, absolutely ridiculous. Fake news at its finest. Now, House Majority Whip Steve Scalise is fighting for his life, and I can't help but look at the vile messages pouring out of Hollywood these days, against not just Trump, but the modern-day GOP. Remember that Kathy Griffin ISIS photo? The Julius Caesar play where a Trump stand-in is getting savagely killed and his stage blood is spilling all over? And then, of course, there's the rhetoric. Trump is Hitler, Trump is Hitler, Trump is Hitler. The guy behind the wire just said that folks on Twitter should get violent if the process fails them. I'm not sure what fails means. Maybe if someone is innocent, maybe they should be declared innocent. Not good enough for David Simon, though. And then there's Jim Jeffries. He's the latest late-night talk show host, and he's been lathering up the hate on not just Donald Trump, but Melania Trump. Let that sink in. She's our first lady, after all. People don't make fun of the first lady, especially not in aggressively sexual ways. It didn't happen with Laura Bush. It certainly didn't happen with Michelle Obama. And it shouldn't happen right now to First Lady Melania Trump. That's just wrong. And I think about all these things, and I wonder, well, maybe there could be a connection, but this really aggressive, consistent, vile rhetoric and some of the thoughts that shooter had when he approached that baseball field that day. Is it possible? I don't know. But one thing is pretty clear. The entertainment media is yawning over just about every slice of hate coming out of today's artists' minds. Madonna says, I'm going to blow up the White House, or at least I'm thinking about it. They yawn. Joss Whedon says that Trump is going to round up and kill gay people. More yawning. The funny thing is, the Rap.com, one of the biggest sites around, recently singled out Ted Nugent when he said he's not going to do any more hate rhetoric. Well, that's great, but where's your coverage of all the liberal artists just spooning out the hate week after week, day after day? All I know is that right now, the entertainment media is doing a terrible job in this really important situation. I don't know if they're actively connected to it. I don't know if there's any responsibility at all. But I do know by their silence, they're kind of stoking the fires of outrage and hate. And they should be ashamed of themselves for their actions. And hopefully we won't have more situations where people are getting shot on either side of the aisle.
Nobody puts baby in a corner.
You will believe a man can fly.
That's right. I'm getting too old for this.
Get to the chopper if you feel lucky, punks.
Buzz, your girlfriend. Woof.
Yo, Adrian.
Hey, we're covering all these franchises and more over here on iTunes at the Franchise Podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Ehrenberg.
And I'm your host, Henry Papali, and check us out, folks.
What's your favorite scary movie? Probably being covered. All right. Take the red pill.
Hello and welcome to my daddy's podcast. He still wears footy pajamas.
Thanks, Eli. This week's hit tip of the week is World's Greatest Dad. It's one of Robin Williams' best performances, and it's a really great example of dark comedy done right. That's not easy. Williams plays a father who, after losing his son to a kind of embarrassing suicide, manages to milk the kid's death for his benefit. It's chilling. It's kind of funny at times. It's certainly thought-provoking. It's also bold and original. It's a movie you won't soon forget. And best of all, it's on Netflix right now. Stream it for free. See what you think. You hate it? Let me know, but I think you're going to like it. Now let's get to our interview with Dave Berg. Dave's a former news producer who, on the urging of his wife, said, you know what? I'm going to apply for a gig at The Tonight Show. Talk about a Hail Mary pass, but you know what? After an 18-year run as The Tonight Show producer, I think his wife is one smart lady. He's currently a columnist for USA Today and the Orange County Register. He's also the author of Behind the Curtain, an insider's view of Jay Leno's Tonight Show. Here's my chat with Dave Berg.
Well, first of all, thank you, Dave, for joining the show. And I've read some of your columns, and I'm really kind of curious to hear some of your thoughts about politics and pop culture. So thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, you know, I'm always curious about how people get to the sort of the higher rungs of show business, which you were with The Tonight Show. And I know you had a hard news broadcasting career and before you joined the show. Can you maybe kind of bridge the gap there and tell us how you got sort of on the show and how kind of that evolution happened?
Well, a wonderful opportunity came up. I got fired. I got fired from NBC News in Burbank.
Uh-huh.
And at the suggestion of my wife, I went down the hallway, and I believe me, I didn't want to take her suggestion, but I went down the hallway to the office of The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, which had just moved into that office. They were about 3 months out from going on the air, and believe me, I objected to her suggestion to go down to that office all day because I felt that was essentially holy territory that I had no business being in. Because you have to remember, I was at NBC in Burbank, and I actually witnessed Johnny Carson, coming into work every day. And believe me, he was a royal presence. So I felt that I was out of my league. Nevertheless, I went down to the office. I applied for a job, and much to my surprise, because I had absolutely no experience in the entertainment business, they hired me.
Huh. Did they happen to say why, or was it just a good resume or just a hunch that you could fit in?
They said that they were interested in going in a different direction than Johnny Carson had. They wanted to expand upon what he was doing. He had emphasized mostly guests from the world of entertainment. And since I had a Rolodex with people from the world of politics and news and sports and those types of things, they were interested in having me as a producer to book those kinds of guests.
Gotcha. And was it the kind of job transition that it worked out well right away? Did it take a while to kind of get your feet wet, or what was your sort of personal transition like?
It was difficult, very, very difficult, because there was much skepticism as to what I could bring to the table. Again, I had no experience in entertainment, and everybody else came from that field, and so there was much skepticism about me, particularly when the executive producer who hired me, she got fired after about 4 months.
Oh no!
I'll never forget that I was asked after she got fired. I was asked, "So exactly what is it that you can bring to the table?" So I really did feel like a square peg, because most of my suggestions were shot down. And in fact, probably about 98% of the people that I was suggesting that we have to kind of expand our background, because that was no longer their vision. So I sort of had to just sort of hang in there because I had no choice, because I didn't have any contacts in the field of entertainment.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Now, obviously, The Tonight Show under Jay Leno was a huge hit. I mean, consistent success. And, Jay's a very funny guy. You get that. The Tonight Show is sort of just one of the most important properties in pop culture. What else was sort of, you think, some of the secrets to the success that maybe because you were there and you were working behind the scenes, you saw that maybe other people just didn't realize?
I think it was all about Jay Leno, but not only, that he's a talented guy, but also the vision that he brought to the table. And that is, he never thought of himself. He thought of himself essentially as a salesman. His feeling was that the viewing audience was more like a customer and he was a salesman, and it was important that the customer always be pleased. When he grew up, his dad had been a life insurance salesman, and he had gone around with his dad when his dad made sales calls, and he noticed that his dad would tell jokes when it came time to close the deal. And I think that really influenced him. He didn't Jay Leno didn't think of himself so much as an artist as a salesman. And I think that's important when you're when you're basically a mainstream show and you're trying to appeal to everybody in the country, not just Los Angeles, not just New York, but also Omaha and Sioux City.
Gotcha. Now, obviously, you said it was sort of a hard time in the beginning. You were adjusting. There was a new boss in charge just a few months after you got there. But you stuck with the show for quite a long time. So obviously, they liked your work. What are you most proud of as far as your contributions to the show overall? Is there a specific theme or something you think you brought to the table that maybe others couldn't?
Well, first of all, I always have to give Jay Leno credit, because no matter what I brought to the table, had he not given his full support, I would not have gotten anywhere. So I have to do that. But I would say bringing a sort of a political, matching Jay Leno's political sensibility. He had an incredible interest in politics and daily issues. And so that fit in really well with my idea of bringing on, say, for instance, presidential candidates. Presidents, ex-presidents, prominent people in the political world, political commentators, pundits, star athletes, quarterbacks who just won the Super Bowl, star pitchers who just won the World Series for their teams. These types of guests, back when we started, were not being booked. So starting with Bob Dole going forward, we basically booked every major presidential candidate.
Gotcha. Now, obviously, Jay Leno and The Tonight Show, his reign ended not too long ago. But if you look at TV today, the late night landscape, it's really different in a lot of ways in just a short amount of time. Maybe too broad a question, but why do you think that there's been such of a sea change here when, Leno hasn't been off the air that long, frankly?
Well, I think that I'll start with Jimmy Fallon, because he was the one right out of the box that brought the sea change, I think, or is most responsible when he started out. I think he had a very good feel for the millennial generation, and he pegged a lot of his humor, a lot of his jokes to that generation. And I think he's been very, very successful at it. And but we've had another sea change in the last year or so, in that we see now the Fallon's competition, Stephen Colbert and other comedians in late night, have politicized the monologue and have essentially made the monologue a political agenda. Most of them, I would say all of them, except for Fallon, all of them have, if you look at their monologues, their goal is to take out President Trump. And that's a huge sea change. I mean, if you go back to the days of Johnny Carson and the tradition that Jay Leno carried out, and to a certain extent David Letterman, the idea was to be an equal opportunity abuser in your monologue. You went after everybody. But now you have late night comedians whose goal is to destroy Donald Trump. And I think that's dangerous, because once you cross the line where the agenda trumps the joke, or let me use another word, where the agenda is more important than the joke, then I'm sorry, you're not doing comedy anymore. You are doing Democratic talking points.
You know, I this has been my theory for a while, that comedy changed when Tina Fey portrayed Sarah Palin on Saturday Night Live, because I think it had a really big impact on the culture and how people viewed her. It was a very good impression. I don't fault Tina Fey at all. But I think that comedians saw that and saw the reaction to that and said, wait a minute, we're not just comedians anymore. We can kind of sway the popular opinion on a certain topic. Do you think that's far-fetched, or do you think there are other maybe sort of cultural points that shifted sort of political comedy into a more extreme point of view?
I think you've brought an insight to this that I didn't realize. I think you're absolutely right. You see, Tina Fey was not only spot on in her portrayal of Sarah Palin, and it was very funny, by the way, but offstage she made it very clear that she couldn't stand Sarah Palin, that she couldn't wait till the political season was over so that she could stop playing Sarah Palin. So, yes, I think you've hit upon something.
Yeah, that's interesting, because a lot of times you'll hear the comedians will say, "Oh, I'm making fun of so and so, but I'd be nervous to meet him, or I don't feel badly for him, or I'm happy to take this role." But she had a very different perspective on that. When he talked about Colbert and some of his colleagues, and they've been pretty significantly left of center, but they're doing well in the ratings. I mean, Colbert has caught up with Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show. Is this a long-term strategy? Is this sort of just feeding off the current venom toward President Trump? What's the big picture here when it comes to, can this last?
My own feeling is that it won't last. I think there's a huge group of people on the left who supported Bernie Sanders and who supported Hillary Clinton, and they desperately need some kind of validation because they lost the election. And I think they're turning to people like Colbert and the rest of the late night hosts, with not so much Fallon, to receive this validation. Well, here's the thing. People that voted for Trump, and there were a lot of them, they're also part of the audience. And I think the big factor here is, and this is something that the media is not reporting, is they're leaving the late night landscape in droves. And so I think once somebody discovers that, hey, we're not serving those people. When we're doing, I monitor monologue jokes, and there have sometimes been several weeks that go by without one single joke about Democrats. Why would anybody who is conservative want to watch that? And they don't. And frankly, I think it would be in Jimmy Fallon's best interest if he went back to doing what he used to do, being an equal opportunity abuser, because he's been following what the others are doing now. He's doing Trump jokes.
Well, what's interesting about Fallon is that he was almost bullied by journalists who barked at him for not only having on Trump and sort of humanizing him with that sort of hair tousle, but also for not being as sort of venomous and hard on Trump as some of his colleagues. I mean, he basically had to add more Trump jokes into his monologue just to kind of appease the journalism crowd, because they said, you can't do this. So it's been disappointing to see that sort of transition as well.
Well, one thing that the journalists left out is a few days after he had Donald Trump on his show, doing what late night hosts have often done with politicians, having a fun interview. A few days after that, he had Hillary Clinton on the show, and he asked equally inane questions of her. Now, personally, I think when you have a political guest on, you should have some hard-edged questions. I really do in late night. I feel pretty strongly about it. And if I was going to criticize Jimmy, it would be for that. But the fact is he had Trump on and then he had Hillary on. And they were lighthearted interviews. So it really, really annoys me that they left out the fact that he also did Hillary a few days later. And it also annoys me that Jimmy Fallon went crawling to the New York Times and basically apologized for the Trump interview. His strategy should have been, no, I'm glad I had Trump on. Nobody else was able to book him, and I got him, and I had Hillary on, and furthermore, I'd like to have him on again. That's the strategy you should be taking.
Yeah, I don't think that would have went over too well in the press, but I agree.
Well,
one of the things I've been...
The press is not responsible for the ratings.
Yeah, that's true. They think they are, perhaps. But one of the things you look at the landscape, and Jim Jeffries just was added, and I think Sarah Silverman is coming soon she's getting her own late night show. I think it's on Hulu. I thought, my goodness, why couldn't you have a decidedly right of center, if not conservative, late night talk show? And I know there's not many comedians to choose from. But you would think from a ratings point of view, if everyone's sort of flocking to the left of center, folks, if you had one guy or gal who's right of center, that might be sort of innovative or kind of a Fox News-esque. Do you think that could happen? And why hasn't it happened yet?
Well, this is just a perfect example of Hollywood leaning to the left and why we need more young people who are conservatives going into the industry. What you said is obviously true. It would be it's sort of a duh sort of thing. We really need someone with a right. That would be true diversity, wouldn't it? They like the word diversity. That would represent true diversity. And it's not being done. And it's so obvious that's what's needed because the pie, my point about late night is the pie is small, right? And it's getting smaller. Viewership of late night is diminishing. And my feeling is it's because conservatives are leaving the game.
You're listening to the Hollywood in Toto podcast, the right take on entertainment.
There's been a lot of talk about Stephen Colbert's holster crack and, of course, Kathy Griffin's recent photo, which caused all the brouhaha. We look at comedians. We never want to stop a comedian from telling a joke, and certainly not from telling a joke about a president. It's the proverbial speaking truth to power. But have we crossed the cultural line, and do you think that the political humor is going to stay this way, or do you think that maybe there's been such a fallout from it that maybe comedians will sort of retreat a bit and maybe get a little less nasty?
No, I don't think they're going to retreat because Kathy Griffin's apology, while it seemed heartfelt, a few days later she was essentially saying that she had every right to do what she did, and she's been defended by fellow comedians. Some of them have said that she just did a joke and it fell short. Well, it wasn't just a joke that fell short. It was a terrible thing that she said. So I don't think they're going to stop doing that. But, for the life of me, I don't get, people doing, I always thought that when you did a joke, the idea was to get a laugh. And tell me what part of a joke, the types of jokes that Colbert is doing, what part of it is funny when he comes out and says, Mr. President, you are a terrible person. You should resign. What part of that is funny?
Yeah, it's kind of an applause line, but that's about it. And I've seen that across the board, especially with Seth Meyers. He's been a sort of a repeat offender there. One of the things that I do when I cover Hollywood is I certainly poke fun at Hollywood. And if a celebrity says something silly, I'll kind of pounce on it. I also kind of like to share more positive stories. And I thought, because of where you worked for so long, do you have any kind of maybe just a quick good story about a celebrity, someone being either honest or selfless or giving in a way that maybe we didn't hear about that you kind of saw behind the scenes at the Tonight Show?
Well, just in general, I'm not a celebrity basher, and I'm not a Hollywood basher. I support the industry. I think most of them work pretty hard. When it comes to politics, I have issues with what they do. But I would have to say that there are more positive. There are more examples of people who are positive and just doing their jobs than being negative. And the example that comes to mind, since I hadn't thought about this, but he and I became pretty good friends, would be and again I worked with a lot of people who weren't in the entertainment business, but I would say Larry the Cable Guy, Dennis Rodman, and
wow.
And in the political world, I would say James Carville. He and I became very good friends.
Mm. Well, that's interesting to hear. Well, he's used to kind of reaching across the aisle because he does it when he goes home every night with his wife. So
that's right.
That's a good sign. I know you're a person of faith and you've worked in Hollywood for quite some time, and that Hollywood sometimes has a less than great reputation when it comes to embracing Christianity. You hear some stories now and then, but did you have any sort of personal experiences with that, where maybe people were less accepting of your faith, or maybe they were treat you like everyone else? I'm just kind of curious, any sort of anecdotes or just reflections on being a Christian in the industry.
Well, you always try to have it be a part of what you did, but you always use your own style to do it. My feeling was you try to lead by example rather than be preachy. So I never really let guests know either my political views or my religious views. But I did try to uplift people, if, for instance, they were overtly Christian. For instance, if a music group came in, right, and it was a Christian group and they prayed before the show, I would join the prayer with them. Now, maybe my favorite story about religion involves Bill Maher.
Okay.
I always worked with Bill, and we developed, actually, to answer your previous question, Bill Maher and I became very good friends. But he didn't know what my political views were. And on the last day that I worked with him, I told him that I thought he was very funny, but that I basically didn't believe much of what he believed in, and that I was also a Sunday school teacher.
Uh-huh.
And he came over to me and he hugged me and he said, "I hope we get to work again, and I hope your replacement doesn't teach Sunday school."
Okay. I know that since you've left the Tonight Show, you're doing some columns for USA Today and also for the Orange County Register. I was kind of curious, would you get back into the late night game if the right opportunity came along? Does that still interest you, or do you kind of think you've done what you've done and you can kind of leave it there?
I've had quite a number of opportunities. People ask me to help, as a consultant or help them develop shows. And honestly, I've just lost interest in not lost interest in it, because I do follow the late night shows pretty closely. But as far as working in it, to me, it's just more fun writing.
Gotcha.
Writing columns and other things. I enjoy that far more. And I also write jokes, by the way, too, for people in the political world. So I enjoy that a little more.
Excellent. Well, Dave, before we let you go, I just want to ask you, we ask all our guests at the Hollywood in Toto podcast, what are you watching these days? What are you reading? Is there anything you've been listening to, that you enjoy that maybe people haven't heard about? Or, you can always recommend the biggest movie, and, everyone's going to go see Wonder Woman because it's quite good. But anything kind of a little bit below the radar that you're enjoying you can share?
Yes, this isn't below the radar, but I have to say maybe my guilty pleasure is House of Cards.
Okay.
Because it's it's a kind of a morality tale of just how absolutely power can corrupt. And I have to say, I don't think the show has any agenda, which is absolutely blows me away, because every show has sort of an agenda. And then the other thing, what I'm really into as far as reading right now is I'm reading. I've read the Bible in its entirety, but I'm doing it under a program called the Bible Project. Uh-huh. It's incredibly impressive the way they have videos, they have podcasts, and I'm very impressed with with their very clever approach to reading the Bible.
Well, excellent. Well, Dave, we'll have links to those specific shout outs on the HollywoodInToto.com page. You can find it at HollywoodInToto.com, Dave-Berg. It's all the show notes there, and everything you can find out is including more information about you. And Dave, before I let you go, tell our listeners a little bit more about your book and where else they can find you online.
Well, thanks. It's called Behind the Curtain, an insider's view of Jay Leno's Tonight Show. And I wrote it basically because I thought, at the end of Jay's run, that the people that write history are the ones that the people that write history are the ones that make the history. So I thought I wanna basically point out the great legacy that Jay brought to the show. Since the critics aren't going to do that, I'll just take it upon myself.
Yeah,
so that
excellent.
was the point of view. But there's a lot of fun, and it's mostly about entertainment. It's kind of a good summer read.
Excellent. Well, perfect time of the year for check that out. Again, Dave Berg, thank you so much. We appreciate your time. We may check in with you down the road. And thanks again for joining the Hollywood in Toto podcast.
Thank you, Christian.
Well, thanks again for listening. Don't forget to check out HollywoodInToto.com for both the show notes and, of course, the latest entertainment news. Please follow me at Twitter at HollywoodInToto. And we'd love it if you leave a podcast review over at iTunes. See you next week.